So these, from our experts by experience, are some of the common assumptions about what people living with dementia can't do. So these are some of the things that they said, when I tell people I have dementia, they assume I can't do these things. So they assume that a person with dementia can't drive, that they can't work or live by themselves, that they can't take risks, that they can't cook their meals, they can't travel independently, they can't take care of others, and they can't make decisions for themselves. And yet there are many people living with dementia who can and do all of these things. The experts by experience also suggested some common assumptions about how people living with dementia might behave. And this was one of the things we asked you to reflect on. So have a look or a think back at your own reflections about people living with dementia, about what you thought about what support might be needed and how they might behave. So some of the common assumptions that our group of experts by experience came up with were what they called challenging behaviour. So they said people often assume that people with dementia will behave in ways that are challenging or will behave in ways that are seen to be aggressive. They also said people will assume that because they have dementia, they will be confused or disorientated or unable to look after themselves, to self-care. And again, these things are not accurate for many people living with dementia. But it's really important that we reflect on our own assumptions and think about ways in which these might impact the way we support people or interact with people or make recommendations about people living with dementia, which can then absolutely lead to them feeling stigmatized. So we're going to hear from some people, some of the dementia diarists, about the experiences that they've had as a result of people making assumptions based on the fact that they have a diagnosis of dementia.
So the swallowing story, but this could be communication issues, it's whatever it is that we're going to be involved with supporting someone with. We tend to place ourselves at the start of the swallowing story when we first meet the patient. And then Act 2 is our work with the person and their family, perhaps. And Act 3 is when everyone lives happily ever after, we've cured everything. Or as happens in acute care, for example, someone gets transferred onto another team. All right, it's this idea of discharge. But this is not the story. The person in front of us had a life before they met us, right? This is really important. Before whatever incident or situation led them to our door. And I always used to tell my students in Pittsburgh, people are not coming to see us because they won the lottery. Pretty much, I can't think of a situation, in fact, where people come to us because something brilliant has happened. They come to us because something troubling has happened. So that's important to remember. So something caused the problem, and then we join that person in Act 2 of their story. All right? So if we hope to have an Act 3, this resolution of any worth, we've got to understand that Act 1 was the setup for Act 2. Not our Act 1, our training and expertise in X, Y, and Z, but the person's Act 1, that person with dementia, their family, the connections, their history. And resolution only comes if we place ourselves in the correct part of the story and we understand the setup.
So the enriched model of dementia care then, so this is what we call a biopsychosocial model. So it has biological, psychological and social elements, and they prompt us to think beyond the diagnosis and to think of the person more holistically. So what this model tells us, and I'm just going to introduce the concepts here, and then we're going to look through them in a bit more detail. So this model tells us that a person's experience of living with dementia, in this case, it can be used for other people as well. that their experience will be impacted by these 5 different elements. So their experience will be impacted by neurological impairment, by health, biography, personality, and social psychology. So we're going to look at each of these in turn. And as we go through, we'll learn a little bit more about Connie as well. So one of the reasons that I really love this enriched model is because when we pull all of that information together, we can see a much bigger picture, a much more detailed picture of who an individual is, and also what's important to them. So we can see here on this slide that we've brought together what we know about Connie in relation to all 5 of those elements. And it's a much better picture than just looking at the diagnosis and the associated symptoms. And this information was so helpful to me to help me to support Connie and also to support Norman as well. So, for example, I mentioned Connie used to lead walking groups. And I myself, I'm a trail runner, so I do long distance trail running. And so Connie and I had this shared love of being out in nature. And so this gave me a topic of conversation to build rapport with Connie, to help her feel at ease with me. And also it meant I could informally assess her communication through conversation as well.